The Millionaire twins hadn't eaten since their mother's death, turning every meal into a ritual of silence and pain. But everything changed when a nanny arrived with the scent of spices, stories of love and hope. She discovered that the twins were hiding food for their mother in the childish hope of her return. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The luxurious Manhattan penthouse should have felt like home. Instead, it echoed with silence that no amount of expensive furniture could fill. Twin sisters Olivia and Emma Reed sat at the mahogany dining table, their identical faces framed by matching auburn hair, staring at untouched plates of professionally catered food. At 12 years old, they were already showing signs of dangerous weight loss, their designer clothes hanging from increasingly bony shoulders. "Girls, please," James Reed pleaded, his voice strained with exhaustion. "You have to eat something. Anything." The girls said nothing. Emma pushed her plate away with a delicate finger, while Olivia simply stared at the wall behind her father's head as if he were invisible. James ran his fingers through his graying hair, a habit he'd developed over the 3 months since his wife's passing. As CEO of Reed Technologies, one of the fastest-growing software companies in the country, he made decisions affecting thousands of employees daily. Yet here, in his own home, he couldn't convince his daughters to take a single bite. The housekeeper silently cleared the plates, giving James a sympathetic look as she retreated to the kitchen. This had become their nightly routine. James would arrange for the finest meals to be prepared, hoping something might tempt the girls. They would refuse to eat. He would plead. They would remain silent. The food would go to waste. "I have an early meeting tomorrow," he finally said, his tone defeated. "The new nanny will be here at 7. Try to be kind to this one, please. Miss Peterson is the 3rd this month." Neither girl acknowledged him as he kissed the tops of their heads and retreated to his home office, where spreadsheets and quarterly reports awaited. At least those made sense. At least there he knew what to do. In the empty dining room, Olivia finally looked at her sister. "Do you think he hired another robot?" she whispered. "Probably," Emma replied, her voice equally soft. "Remember the last one, with the clipboard and the nutrition charts? The worst was the one before that, the one who kept saying, 'Your father is paying me good money to make sure you eat.'" They shared the ghost of a smile, their first in days. "We should sleep," Emma said, standing up. "We have to be ready when she gets here." "Ready to make her quit?" Olivia agreed. The twins climbed the sweeping staircase to their shared bedroom, a space that their father had hired the city's most prestigious interior designer to create. The walls were painted a soft lavender, adorned with framed artwork that cost more than most people's cars. Twin canopy beds stood across from each other, still perfectly made from the morning. Neither girl had slept properly in their beds for weeks. Instead, they waited for the house to grow quiet before opening the door to what had once been their mother's walk-in closet. Curling up among the remaining designer dresses that still faintly smelled of Chanel No. 5, they finally allowed themselves to relax. This was their sanctuary, the only place where they felt close to Elizabeth Reed. Morning came too quickly. The sound of unfamiliar footsteps in the hallway woke the girls, who scrambled back to their beds before anyone discovered their hiding place. They barely had time to throw the covers over themselves when a knock came at their door. "Olivia?" "Emma, may I come in?" The voice was unlike the previous nannies, warm with a slight southern accent. The door opened before they could respond. A woman in her early 30s stood in the doorway, wearing jeans and a simple blue button-down shirt rather than the formal attire the previous nannies had worn. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and her brown eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "Good morning, sleepyheads. I'm Hannah Parker, your new nanny, or babysitter, or friend. Whatever you want to call me is fine." The Catifou. Twins exchanged glances. This was not what they had expected. "Your father left for his meeting already, but he said you like pancakes. Is that true, or was he just guessing?" Hannah asked, moving into the room with a relaxed confidence none of the previous nannies had possessed. "We don't eat breakfast," Emma said flatly. "Or lunch," Olivia added. Or dinner, they finished in unison. Hannah nodded thoughtfully. Well, that's certainly your choice. But I'm making pancakes for myself, and I'd love some company in that big kitchen. It feels a little lonely down there. The twins were thrown off balance. The other nannies had insisted, cajoled, even tried to force them to eat. None had simply accepted their refusal. We can sit with you, Olivia offered cautiously. Hannah smiled. Perfect. I'll be downstairs whenever you're ready. No rush. After she left, the girls dressed slowly, unsure what to make of this new addition to the household. She won't last a week, Emma predicted as they descended the stairs. Maybe not even 3 days, Olivia agreed. But when they entered the kitchen, they were met with a sight unlike anything they'd seen since their mother's passing. Hannah had transformed the sterile, rarely used space. Music played softly from her phone, and the marble countertops were covered with flour, mixing bowls, and ingredients. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air. There you are, Hannah said cheerfully. I hope you don't mind, but I raided your pantry. You have fantastic ingredients that look like they've never been touched. Our personal chef usually prepares everything, Emma explained, climbing onto a bar stool at the counter. Well, today I'm the chef and I'm making a mess, Hannah laughed, flipping a pancake with a flourish. My grandmother taught me that food tastes better when you've had a hand in making it. The girls watched in silence as Hannah continued cooking, occasionally dancing to the music or telling them about the small town in Georgia where she grew up. She didn't pressure them to participate or eat. She simply existed in the space with a warmth that felt oddly comforting. When the pancakes were ready, Hannah set a plate in front of each girl, alongside strawberries, whipped cream, and maple syrup. She then made herself a plate and sat beside them. You know what my grandma used to say? Hannah asked between bites. She said that food is memory, that every recipe has a story behind it. The twins remained silent, but Hannah noticed their eyes following her fork as she took another bite. These pancakes, my grandma made them every Sunday morning. The whole house would smell like vanilla and cinnamon, and even before I opened my eyes, I knew what day it was just from that smell. Hannah continued eating and talking, telling stories about her childhood in Georgia, her grandmother's cooking, and how she ended up in New York. She never once commented on the girls' untouched plates. As Hannah cleared her own empty plate, she casually said, I'll leave these here in case you change your minds. I need to unpack my things anyway. She left the kitchen, and the twins sat in silence for a moment. She's different, Olivia finally said. Emma nodded, her finger tentatively touching the edge of her pancake. Do you think Mom would have liked her pancakes? Maybe, Olivia whispered. Maybe we should save some, just in case. Emma nodded. And carefully they each took a small piece of pancake and wrapped it in a napkin. Later, when Hannah wasn't looking, they would add it to their collection, the food they'd been saving for their mother's return. What they didn't realize was that Hannah, returning to retrieve her phone, had paused outside the kitchen door. She watched as the girls tucked away the food with practiced movements, their small faces solemn with purpose, her heart constricted with understanding. In that moment, Hannah knew exactly why these wealthy little girls refused to eat, and it had nothing to do with rebellion or attention-seeking. They were saving the food for someone who would never return. Hannah backed away silently, her mind already forming a plan. James Reed had hired her to feed his daughters, but she now understood that the hunger these children suffered from couldn't be satisfied with just any food. They needed nourishment of a different kind entirely. In her temporary bedroom, Hannah unpacked the few possessions she'd brought with her: simple clothes, some books, and a small wooden box containing handwritten recipe cards passed down from her grandmother. She had come to New York seeking a fresh start after leaving her position as a social worker in Georgia. The ad for a live-in nanny for twin girls had seemed like fate, offering both employment and housing in a city where she knew no one. She had no idea what she was walking into. A home filled with wealth but devoid of warmth, and 2 little girls wasting away from grief. Hannah touched her grandmother's recipe box, remembering the old woman's words. Food feeds the body, but love feeds the soul. And sometimes, child, people are starving for both. That evening, James Reed returned home later than usual. his shoulders tense from a day of difficult negotiations. He expected to find the house as he always did, quiet, with the twins likely holed up in their room, and perhaps another resignation letter from the new nanny. Instead, he was greeted by the unfamiliar scent of home cooking and the sound of soft music coming from the kitchen. He set down his briefcase, loosened his tie, and followed the aroma. The scene that greeted him was so unexpected that he stopped short in the doorway. Hannah stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot, while Emma sat at the counter watching her. Olivia was nowhere to be seen, but the mere fact that one of his daughters was voluntarily in the kitchen was astonishing. "Mr. Reed," Hannah greeted him with a warm smile. "Welcome home. We're just making some chicken and dumplings. Southern comfort food, my specialty." "Dad," Emma acknowledged without looking at him directly. It was still more interaction than he'd gotten from her in weeks. "Thank you," James managed, unsure how to respond to this unfamiliar scenario. "Where's Olivia?" "Setting the table," Hannah replied easily. "We decided to eat in the dining room tonight. Make it special." James raised an eyebrow. The twins hadn't willingly entered the dining room since Elizabeth's passing. They took their uneaten meals in the kitchen or their bedroom. "Is there something I can do to help?" he asked, feeling oddly like a guest in his own home. "You could pour the water," Emma suggested quietly, not quite meeting his eyes. James moved to the task eagerly, grateful for any connection with his daughter. Hannah watched, the interaction with quiet satisfaction. Progress would be slow, but it was progress nonetheless. Dinner was a subdued affair, but markedly different from the tense, silent meals of recent months. The twins didn't eat much, just a few small bites, but they sat at the table without complaint, occasionally answering Hannah's gentle questions about their school and friends. James tried not to stare at the miracle unfolding before him. He'd hired nutritionists, child psychologists, and 3 different nannies, all to no avail. Yet this woman had somehow gotten his daughters to take a few bites of food and engage in conversation after just one day. "How did you do this?" he asked Hannah later after the twins had gone upstairs and they were alone in the kitchen. Hannah paused in her cleanup. "Do what exactly?" "Get them to participate, to eat something, even if it was just a little." Hannah considered her words carefully. "Mr. Reed, James, please." "James," she corrected with a small smile. "I think your daughters are dealing with their grief in the only way they know how." He stiffened at the mention of grief. "The therapist said we shouldn't dwell on their mother's absence, that we should focus on moving forward." Hannah nodded, thoughtfully. "Everyone processes loss differently. Sometimes moving forward means first acknowledging where you've been." She hesitated, then added, "There's something you should know about the girls." She told him about seeing them hide food, and her suspicion about why they were doing it. James sank into a chair, his face in his hands. "They think she's coming back," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They're saving food for Elizabeth." "It's not uncommon for children to have magical thinking around loss," Hannah explained gently. "Their minds create ways to cope with what's too painful to accept." "What do I do?" James asked, looking utterly lost. "How do I fix this?" "You can't fix grief," Hannah said softly, "but you can walk through it with them. And maybe, in time, help them understand that their mother would want them to be healthy and strong." James nodded, blinking rapidly. "Thank you for telling me this, for seeing what I couldn't." Hannah smiled sadly. "Sometimes it takes an outsider's eyes." Over the next few days, Hannah established a routine with the twins. Each morning, she'd cook breakfast and invite them to help. They rarely ate what they prepared, but they became increasingly engaged in the process itself, measuring ingredients and stirring batters under Hannah's guidance. She never pressured them to eat, never commented when they slipped portions of food into napkins. Instead, she told stories about her grandmother's cooking, about growing up in Georgia, about the years she spent working with children as a social worker before coming to New York. The twins listened with growing interest, occasionally asking questions or sharing small details of their own lives. One afternoon, while James was at work, Hannah decided it was time to address the hidden food directly. She found the girls in their bedroom, huddled together over a large ornate jewelry box. "May I come in?" she asked from the doorway. The twins startled, quickly closing the box. "We're busy," Olivia said defensively. "I can see that," Hannah replied, entering the room despite their reluctance. "That's a beautiful box. Your mother's?" The girls exchanged glances. "How did you know?" Emma finally asked. "Just a guess," Hannah said, sitting on the edge of Olivia's bed. "May I see what's inside?" After a long moment of silent communication between them, Olivia cautiously opened the box. Inside, Hannah found exactly what she'd suspected: small portions of food, most now moldy or dried out, carefully wrapped in napkins and tissue paper. "You've been saving these," Hannah said softly, "for your mum." The twins' eyes filled with tears. "She might be hungry when she comes back," Emma whispered. "And she always loved trying new foods," Olivia added. Hannah's heart broke for these children who had created this ritual out of love and denial. "Your mum loved food, did she?" Both girls nodded eagerly, animation entering their faces for the first time. "She was always trying new restaurants," Emma said. "And she cooked with us every Sunday," Olivia added. "She let us lick the spoon when we made cookies." "She sounds wonderful," Hannah said sincerely. "I wish I could have met her." "She would have liked you," Emma said softly, surprising both Hannah and herself with the statement. Hannah smiled. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "Girls, I think it's beautiful that you want to save food for your mom. It shows how much you love her." The twins looked at her with cautious hope, clearly expecting a but to follow. "And I think your mom would be so touched by your thoughtfulness," Hannah continued. "But I also think she'd be worried about you, about how thin you've gotten, and how little energy you have now." The girls' faces fell. "But we have to save the food," Olivia insisted, "for when she comes back." Hannah nodded, accepting their reality rather than challenging it. "What if we found a different way to honor your mum, one that would make her happy while still taking care of yourselves?" The twins looked at each other, uncertain. "What if," Hannah suggested gently, "instead of saving food that spoils, we create a recipe book of all her favorite dishes? We could cook them together, try them, and write down exactly how they taste, so when she's here again, she'll know you've been thinking of her through food?" Emma bit her lip. "But what if she's hungry right away?" "Then we'll cook her favorite meal first thing," Hannah promised. "I bet between the three of us we could make something delicious faster than anyone in New York." A flicker of interest crossed the girls' faces. "She loved pasta carbonara," Olivia said cautiously. "And tiramisu," Emma added. "Those sound delicious," Hannah said. "Why don't we start there? We could make them this weekend, taste them, and write down our thoughts for her." The girls considered, this proposal having a silent twin conversation with their eyes. "Okay," Olivia finally said, "but we have to do it right. Mum was very particular about recipes." "Absolutely," Hannah agreed. "Now what should we do with these?" She gestured to the moldy food in the box. The twins looked distressed. "We can't throw them away," Emma protested. "What? If we had a small ceremony," Hannah suggested, "to thank the food for holding your love for your mom before we let it go?" This idea resonated with the girls. That evening, they held a solemn ceremony in the building's rooftop garden, releasing the saved food bits into the compost bin, while Hannah led them in, saying thank you to each piece for holding their love. It was unconventional, perhaps, but it allowed the twins to begin letting go without feeling they were abandoning their mother. When they returned to the apartment, James was waiting, having come home early at Hannah's text request. He looked questioningly at the three of them. "We had a ceremony," Olivia explained, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "For Mom's food," Emma added, "but now we're going to make a recipe book instead." James looked at Hannah with profound gratitude. She gave him a small nod, encouraging him to engage with this moment. "That sounds wonderful," he said carefully. "Your mother would love that idea." "Hannah says we're going to make carbonara this weekend," Olivia continued. "You could help if you want." James swallowed hard. "I'd like that very much." That night, for the first time in months, the twins slept in their own beds rather than in their mother's closet. Hannah checked on them before going to her own room, finding them sleeping peacefully, their faces relaxed in a way she hadn't yet seen. In the hallway, she nearly collided with James, who had apparently had the same idea. "They're sleeping," she whispered. "Actually sleeping." James nodded, emotion making it difficult to speak. "Thank you," he finally managed. "I don't know how you knew what to do, but thank you." Hannah smiled. Sometimes children need permission to grieve in their own way, and then permission to begin healing. They're remarkable girls, James. They just needed someone to see what they were really hungry for. As she turned to go to her room, James found himself watching her, struck by a sudden awareness of Hannah, as more than just his daughter's caretaker. She was a woman with insight and compassion that went far beyond what he'd expected when he hired her. For the first time since losing Elizabeth, James felt a flicker of something that wasn't grief or worry, a warm appreciation for the gentle strength of the woman who was bringing his daughters back to life. He quickly dismissed the feeling as gratitude, nothing more. After all, he was still mourning his wife, and Hannah was his employee. Still, as he returned to his own bedroom, James realized that the crushing loneliness that had become his constant companion felt just a little lighter tonight. The weekend arrived with a sense of anticipation that had been absent from the Reed household for months. The twins woke early, eager to begin their cooking project. Hannah found them in the kitchen, already dressed, flipping through old cookbooks they discovered in a forgotten cabinet. "We found Mom's recipes," Emma announced, holding up a leather-bound journal with handwritten notes. She used to write everything down. Hannah's heart swelled at the genuine excitement in the girl's voice. "That's perfect. Now we'll know exactly how to make her favorites." James appeared in the doorway, looking slightly rumpled in jeans and a casual sweater. Hannah realized she'd only ever seen him in business suits or pajamas. "Dad, look what we found," Olivia called, waving the recipe book. "I remember that," James said softly, approaching the counter. "Your mother wrote in it every time she mastered a new dish." "Can we use it?" Emma asked. "Of course," James replied, gently taking the book and leafing through it. "She'd want you to." He paused at a page, a small smile forming. "Here's the carbonara recipe. She learned it when we went to Italy for our 5th anniversary." The twins crowded around him, their small fingers tracing their mother's handwriting. Hannah busied herself gathering ingredients, giving the family a moment of shared remembrance. "I don't know how much help I'll be," James admitted as Hannah set out pots and pans. "Elizabeth did all the cooking. I can barely make toast without burning it." "Perfect," Hannah replied with a mischievous smile. "You can be our taste tester then." The kitchen transformed into a workshop of culinary creation. Hannah guided the twins through the steps of making pasta carbonara, explaining techniques while allowing them to do the actual work. James watched in amazement as his daughters, who had barely eaten in months, enthusiastically whisked eggs and grated cheese. "Mom always said to save some pasta water," Olivia remembered, carefully setting aside a cup of the starchy liquid before draining the pasta. "She was right," Hannah confirmed. "It's the secret to silky sauce." When the dish was complete, Hannah served small portions into 4 bowls. The twins hesitated before taking their forks. "For Mom's recipe book," Hannah reminded them gently, "we need to know exactly how it tastes to describe it." Emma was the first to take a small bite. Her eyes widened. "It tastes like being wrapped in a warm blanket." Olivia followed, nodding in agreement. "It's creamy and salty and it tastes like when Mom made it." James watched in wonder as his daughters took another bite, then another. They weren't just tasting the food, they were eating it. Not much, but more than he'd seen in months. "What do you think, James?" Hannah asked, pulling him from his thoughts. He twirled pasta around his fork and took a bite. The flavors transported him instantly to that tiny restaurant in Rome, Elizabeth laughing across the table, her eyes sparkling in the candlelight. "It's perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Exactly how she made it." After lunch, they gathered around the kitchen island with colored pens and a blank notebook Hannah had purchased. The twins dictated their description of the carbonara, while Hannah wrote it down, adding a note about the memory James had shared of the trip to Italy. "Now we need a picture," Olivia declared. "Mom always took pictures of her food." James pulled out his phone. "Let's all get in it," he suggested. "Your mom would want to see who made her favorite dish." The resulting photo captured something that hadn't existed in the Reed household for a long time: genuine smiles. Hannah pasted it into the book alongside the recipe and description. "What's next?" Emma asked, energy in her voice that had been missing for months. "Tiramisu was on your list," Hannah reminded them, "but it needs to set overnight. Should we start it now?" The afternoon passed in a blur of activity as they tackled the Italian dessert. James proved surprisingly adept at dipping ladyfingers in coffee, a task he approached with CEO-level focus. The twins took turns layering the cookies and mascarpone mixture, and Hannah supervised the dusting of cocoa powder on top. "Now we wait. Until tomorrow," Hannah explained as she placed the tiramisu in the refrigerator. "The flavors need time to come together." "Just like us," Emma said quietly, looking at her father and sister. The comment hung in the air, simple yet profound, coming from a 12-year-old. James reached out and pulled Emma into a hug, then extended his other arm to include Olivia. Hannah discreetly stepped away, giving them privacy, but James caught her eye over the twins' heads, his gaze conveying deep gratitude. That evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Hannah found James in his home office, surrounded by papers but staring into space. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked from the doorway. James looked up, a tired smile crossing his face. "They're worth considerably less than that, I'm afraid." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit." Hannah settled into the leather armchair, taking in the space that was clearly James's sanctuary. Photos of the twins at various ages adorned the walls, alongside business awards and degrees. Elizabeth appeared in many of the family photos, a beautiful woman with the same auburn hair as her daughters, her smile radiant. "Today was," James began, then paused, searching for words. "A good day," Hannah supplied. "The best we've had in a long time," he agreed. "I haven't heard them laugh like that since before." He trailed off, the familiar pain crossing his features. "It's okay to say it," Hannah said gently. "Since before Elizabeth died." James nodded, grateful for her directness. "The therapists kept telling me not to dwell on it, to focus on moving forward and creating new normals. But pretending it didn't happen just made everything worse." "Grief isn't something you get over," Hannah said. "It's something you learn to carry. The twins needed to find their way to carry it." "And you helped them find that way," James said, his eyes meeting hers. "Through food, of all things." Hannah smiled. "Food is more than sustenance. It's memory, connection, love. Your wife understood that based on her recipe book." "She did," James agreed. "Elizabeth believed that meals were about bringing people together, not just filling stomachs." He shook his head in wonder. "The girls, they ate today. Actually ate, not much, but it's a start," Hannah assured him. "They're finding their way back, one bite at a time." A comfortable silence fell between them. Hannah noticed the dark circles under James's eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "You're carrying a lot," she observed. "The company, the girls, your own grief." James gave a humorless laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's looking," Hannah replied. "The twins aren't the only ones who need to heal, you know." "I don't have that luxury," James said, straightening the papers on his desk. "They need me to be strong." "Being strong doesn't mean never faltering," Hannah countered. "Sometimes it means acknowledging when you're struggling." James looked at her for a long moment. "Is that what you did when you left Georgia?" Hannah was surprised by the question. "How did you know I was struggling?" "People don't usually leave established careers to become nannies in another state unless they're running toward something or away from something," James observed. "And you don't strike me as someone who runs away." "Maybe I'm both running away and toward something," Hannah admitted. "My work as a social worker was rewarding but draining. After 10 years I felt empty, like I'd given all I had to give." She hadn't intended to share this much, but something about James's quiet attention made it easy to continue. My grandmother passed last year. She was my anchor. Without her, Georgia didn't feel like home anymore. I'm sorry about your grandmother, James said sincerely. Thank you, Hannah replied. She lived a full life, loved hard, and made the world's best fried chicken. I can't be too sad about that. She smiled at the memory. Anyway, New York seemed like a good place to start fresh. Your ad for a nanny was the first job I applied for. Lucky. For us, James said. The moment stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with something neither was ready to name. I should let you get back to work, Hannah finally said, standing. Actually, James hesitated, I was thinking of calling it a night. Would you like a glass of wine? To celebrate today's success. Hannah considered the invitation. She was his employee, and maintaining professional boundaries was important, but she also recognized that James Reed was a man who needed a friend, as much as his daughters needed a caretaker. One glass, she agreed, as long as we stick to talking about the girls' progress. James smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his tired face. Deal. They moved to the living room, where James opened a bottle of red wine and poured 2 glasses. Their conversation flowed easily, focusing initially on the twins but gradually expanding to books they'd both read, films they'd enjoyed, and their differing opinions on New York pizza versus Southern barbecue. I can't believe you've never had proper Georgia barbecue, Hannah exclaimed, when James admitted his limited experience with Southern cuisine. I've spent most of my life in New York and California, James defended himself. Silicon Valley isn't known for its pulled pork. That's a culinary tragedy, Hannah declared. I'll have to make you some real Southern food. Pulled pork, collard greens, cornbread so good it'll make you cry. I'll hold you to that, James said, his eyes warm with amusement, and something else Hannah wasn't ready to acknowledge. When she finally excused herself to go to bed, Hannah realized they'd talked for nearly 3 hours, and the professional boundaries she'd intended to maintain had blurred considerably. James Reed was no longer just her employer. He was becoming a friend, and if her heart beat a little faster when he smiled at her, well, that was something she would examine another time. The next morning, the twins were once again in the kitchen when Hannah arrived, this time in their pajamas. Can we try the tiramisu now? Olivia asked eagerly. After breakfast, Hannah laughed. How about some eggs and toast first? To her surprise, neither girl protested. They helped her crack eggs and butter toast, and when the simple meal was ready, they each ate a small portion without prompting. Hannah kept her excitement in check, not wanting to draw attention to this milestone. When James joined them, looking more rested than he had in days, Hannah gave him a subtle nod, indicating the girls' empty plates. His eyes widened briefly, before he composed his features. Good morning, everyone, he said casually. I hear there's tiramisu waiting for us. After breakfast, Dad, Emma informed him. Hannah says dessert comes after real food. James caught Hannah's eye over his coffee cup, his expression a mix of amazement and gratitude. She smiled back, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen's temperature. After breakfast, they gathered around the island as Hannah removed the tiramisu from the refrigerator. The twins watched with anticipation as she cut 4 slices and placed them on plates. For the recipe book, Emma reminded everyone, though the prompt was no longer needed. She took a bite and closed her eyes. It's like clouds and coffee had a baby. Olivia giggled at her sister's description. It's sweet, but not too sweet, and the coffee taste is grown up. Your mother would approve of that description, James said, enjoying his own slice. She always said dessert should be sophisticated, not just sugary. They added the tiramisu to the recipe book, complete with another family photo and the twins' colorful description. As Hannah watched the family interact, she realized that what had begun as a way to help the girls eat had become something much more significant, a bridge between their past and present, a way to honor Elizabeth's memory while beginning to heal. The recipe book was more than a collection of dishes. It was becoming a family story told through flavors and memories, connecting what was lost with what remained. And Hannah, who had come to New York seeking a fresh start, found herself becoming part of that story in ways she hadn't anticipated. The recipe book project blossomed over the following weeks, becoming the heart of the Reed household's routine. Each weekend, the family would select another dish from Elizabeth's journal, prepare it together and add it to their growing collection of memories and flavors. The twins began eating regularly, small portions at first, then gradually increasing. As their bodies remembered what it was like to be nourished, Hannah watched their transformation with quiet pride. The gaunt, listless girls she'd met a month ago were giving way to children with rosy cheeks and occasional smiles. They still had moments of profound sadness, nights when one or both would cry for their mother, but the sharp edge of grief was slowly dulling. James, too, was changing. He'd begun arranging his schedule to be home for dinner most evenings, participating in the cooking whenever possible. His awkwardness in the kitchen became a source of family amusement, with the twins gleefully documenting his mishaps in what they called Dad's Disaster Corner in the recipe book. One evening in late October, after the twins had gone to bed, Hannah found James in the kitchen, attempting to recreate the southern biscuits they'd made over the weekend. "What's the occasion?" she asked, watching him struggle with the dough. "Just practicing," he said, flour dusting his normally immaculate appearance. "The girls seem to really love these." Hannah leaned against the counter, amusement playing at her lips. "You're making quite a mess for just practicing." James looked around at the flour-covered countertops and laughed. "I suppose I am." He pushed his hair back, leaving a white streak across his forehead. "I never cooked when Elizabeth was alive. She was so good at it and I was always working. Now I regret all those missed opportunities to be in the kitchen with her, with the girls." Hannah stepped forward, gently wiping the flour from his forehead. "You're making new memories now, that matters." Their eyes met, and for a moment neither moved. Hannah became acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth of his skin under her fingers. She stepped back, clearing her throat. "Your dough is too wet," she said, focusing on the biscuits. "You need more flour." James nodded, grateful for the direction. "Show me." Hannah moved beside him, adding flour to the mixture and demonstrating how to fold the dough rather than knead it. "Biscuits need a gentle touch," she explained. "Too much handling makes them tough." "I'm not very good at gentle," James admitted. "In business, it's all about being firm, decisive." "Being gentle doesn't mean being weak," Hannah corrected. "Sometimes it takes more strength to be gentle than to be hard." James considered this as he attempted to mimic her technique with the dough. "Is that what makes you so good with the girls? This balance of strength and gentleness?" Hannah hadn't expected the question. "I suppose so. Working with children in the system taught me that firmness without compassion just creates resistance. But compassion without boundaries creates insecurity." "You never talk much about your work as a social worker," James observed. "Was it difficult to leave it behind?" Hannah carefully cut circles from the dough before answering. "Parts of it were. I loved helping children find stability, seeing them thrive when given the right support." She placed the biscuits on a baking sheet. "But the system is broken in so many ways. Too many kids, not enough resources, bureaucracy that gets in the way of doing what's right. After a while it wears you down." "Is that why you left?" James asked, placing the biscuits in the preheated oven. Hannah set the timer before responding. "Partly. And then my grandmother's passing made me reevaluate everything." She smiled sadly. "She raised me after my parents divorced. When she was gone, Georgia didn't feel like home anymore." "And does New York feel like home now?" James asked quietly. Hannah met his gaze. "Parts of it are beginning to." The moment was interrupted by the sound of small feet on the stairs. Emma appeared, in the doorway, her eyes heavy with sleep. "I had a bad dream," she said softly. "About Mom." James immediately went to his daughter, pulling her into an embrace. "Do you want to talk about it?" Emma shook her head against his chest. "It smells good in here." "Your dad is making midnight biscuits," Hannah explained with a smile. "Can I have one when they're done?" Emma asked. "Of course," James replied, leading her to a stool at the counter. "They probably won't be as good as Hannah's, though." "That's okay," Emma said, resting her head on her arms. Mom's first tries weren't always good either. She said that's how you learn. James and Hannah exchanged a glance over the girl's head, both recognizing the significance of Emma speaking about her mother so naturally. When the biscuits were done, the three of them sat at the kitchen island, eating them with honey and butter. Emma's nightmare was forgotten as she critiqued her father's first solo baking attempt. "They're a little flat," she observed seriously, "but they taste good." "High praise indeed," James laughed, ruffling her hair. After Emma returned to bed, Hannah helped James clean up the kitchen, their movements falling into an easy rhythm they'd developed over weeks of cooking together. "Thank you," James said suddenly. "For helping with the biscuits?" Hannah asked. "For everything." He turned to face her. "For saving my daughters. For bringing life back into this home. For—" He hesitated. "For making me remember what it's like to look forward to coming home at the end of the day." Hannah felt a flutter in her chest at his words. "James, I know it's complicated," he continued. "Quickly. How you work for me, the girls are still healing, I'm still—" He trailed off. "Still grieving," Hannah finished for him. "It's okay to say it." James nodded. "Yes, still grieving, but also starting to live again." He took a step closer to her. "Because of you." The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken feelings. Hannah knew she should step back, maintain the professional distance that was rapidly dissolving. Instead, she found herself rooted to the spot, drawn to this man who was trying so hard to rebuild his broken family. The shrill ring of James's phone shattered the moment. He closed his eyes briefly in frustration before answering. "Read." Hannah busied herself with wiping down the counters, trying to regain her composure as James dealt with some apparent crisis at work. When he hung up, his CEO persona was firmly back in place. "I'm sorry," he said, already reaching for his laptop. "There's an issue with our Tokyo office. I need to handle this tonight." "Of course," Hannah replied, relief and disappointment warring within her. "I'll finish up here." James paused at the doorway. "Hannah, about what I said." "It's late," she cut him off gently. "We're both tired. Let's talk another time." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded and disappeared into his office. Hannah leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. What was she doing? James Reed was her employer, still grieving his wife, with two vulnerable children who needed stability. Developing feelings for him was complicated at best, potentially disastrous at worst. She'd come to New York for a fresh start, not to step into someone else's unfinished story. And yet, she couldn't deny the connection that had formed between them, or the way her heart raced when he looked at her the way he had tonight. "Boundaries, Hannah," she muttered to herself as she turned off the kitchen lights. "Remember your boundaries." The following day brought a new development. The twins' school called to invite parents to a fall festival that weekend. Emma and Olivia, who had previously shown no interest in school events, suddenly wanted to attend. "We're making apple cider and pumpkin bread in our cooking club," Olivia explained excitedly, "and we want you and Dad to try them." "And Hannah too," Emma added. "She has to come." James looked uncertain. "Hannah might have other plans, girls." "I'd be happy to come," Hannah assured them, ignoring the voice in her head warning about blurring more lines. "I'd love to see your school." The girls beamed, rushing off to find their project materials for the festival. James turned to Hannah with an apologetic expression. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "It's not part of your job description." "I want to," Hannah replied simply, "unless you'd rather I didn't come." "No, James shook his head. "The girls clearly want you there, and so do I. I just don't want to presume on your personal time." "It's fine, really," Hannah assured him. "Besides, I'm curious to taste this famous pumpkin bread." The fall festival arrived on a perfect October Saturday, the air crisp with autumn, and the school grounds decorated with pumpkins and colorful leaves. Hannah found herself walking between James and the twins, feeling simultaneously part of their family and distinctly separate. Several parents glanced curiously at her, clearly wondering about her relationship to the Reed family. Mr. Reed, a stylishly dressed woman, approached them, her smile a bit too bright. "How lovely to see you participating in school events again." "Ms. Archer," James greeted her politely. Yes, the girls were excited about their cooking club display. Wonderful, Miss Archer replied, her gaze sliding to Hannah with undisguised curiosity. And who is your friend? This is Hannah Parker, James replied. She's been an invaluable help with the girls these past few months. The nanny, Miss Archer clarified, her smile cooling several degrees. How nice. Hannah extended her hand, determined to be gracious despite the woman's thinly veiled condescension. It's a pleasure to meet you. Are you a teacher here? Oh no, Miss Archer laughed lightly. I'm on the school board. My son Parker is in the twins grade. We've known the Reed family for years, haven't we, James? The proprietary way she said his name made Hannah glance at James, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Rebecca's husband is one of my company's investors, he explained to Hannah. The Archers have been very supportive since Elizabeth's passing. James. As being modest, Rebecca said, placing a manicured hand on his arm, we've been practically family. In fact, I was just telling the benefit committee that you should chair our winter gala this year. It would be so good for you to get back into the social scene. Before James could respond, the twins appeared, grabbing Hannah's hands. Come see our booth, Emma urged. We're about to serve the pumpkin bread. You must excuse us, James said to Rebecca, not sounding particularly sorry. Duty calls. As they walked away, Hannah caught Rebecca's speculative gaze following them. Sorry about that, James muttered. Rebecca has been rather persistent since Elizabeth's passing. Ah, Hannah nodded, understanding dawning. The helpful widow. James gave a surprised laugh. Exactly. Though she's divorced, not widowed. Even more dangerous, Hannah replied with a playful smile, though something uncomfortable twisted in her stomach at the thought of the elegant Rebecca Archer pursuing James. The twins' cooking club booth was a hit, their pumpkin bread earning praise from parents and teachers alike. Hannah watched with pride as the formerly withdrawn girls confidently served samples and explained the recipe to visitors. They're different children, remarked an older woman, who had stopped beside Hannah. I hardly recognized them. Hannah turned to find a kind-faced woman watching the twins with evident affection. I'm Mrs. Peterson, their English teacher, the woman introduced herself. I've been worried about them all semester, but today, she shook her head in wonder. Today they're present, engaged. Whatever you're doing at home, it's working. Thank you, Hannah replied, touched by the teacher's observation. They're remarkable girls. They just needed some time to find their way through the grief. Mrs. Peterson nodded thoughtfully. Loss is difficult at any age, but especially for children. It's good they have both their father and you to support them. Before Hannah could clarify her role, the teacher had moved on to another booth. The assumption that she was more than the nanny was becoming a pattern today, and Hannah wasn't sure how she felt about it. Part of her wanted to correct the misunderstanding, while another part found herself wishing it were true. The day progressed pleasantly, with the family visiting various booths and participating in fall activities. By late afternoon, the twins were happily exhausted, their cheeks flushed with excitement and autumn air. Ice cream before we head home? James suggested, pointing to a vendor at the edge of the school grounds. Yes, the girls chorused, running. Go ahead. As Hannah and James followed at a more sedate pace, he reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. The gesture was so natural that Hannah didn't immediately react, her hand fitting comfortably in his larger one. Is this okay? He asked quietly, giving her the opportunity to pull away. Hannah knew she should. Their relationship was already complicated enough without adding public displays of affection. But the warmth of his hand, the rightness of it against hers, made her hesitate. For now, she finally replied, squeezing his hand gently. James smiled and they walked together toward the ice cream stand, where the twins were already deliberating between flavors. To anyone observing, they looked exactly like what they weren't, a normal, happy family enjoying a full day together. November arrived with biting winds and the promise of an early winter. The Reed household had fallen into a comfortable routine, with cooking and meals now central to their daily lives. The twins were eating regularly, their bodies slowly regaining the strength that months of near starvation had depleted. They had returned to their activities at school, Emma to her beloved orchestra, where she played violin, and Olivia to the debate team, where her quick mind and increasingly confident voice were making her a formidable competitor. Hannah watched, their transformation with a mixture of pride and caution. The girls were healing, but their recovery remained fragile. Certain triggers, a song that reminded them of their mother, holidays approaching, could still plunge them into periods of sadness. But now, instead of retreating into silence and self-deprivation, they had begun to express their grief in healthier ways, talking about Elizabeth and the memories they cherished. James, too, was changing. The workaholic CEO still tackled emergencies at all hours, but he had started setting boundaries around family time. Dinner became sacred, his phone silenced and tucked away during meals. Weekends often found him in the kitchen with flour on, his expensive sweaters, learning to make his daughter's favorite foods. His relationship with Hannah remained in a careful limbo. Since the hand-holding at the fall festival, there had been other small moments of connection, a lingering touch when passing ingredients, conversations that stretched late into the night after the twins were asleep, the way his eyes sought hers across the dinner table. Neither had put words to what was developing between them, but both felt its presence, a current of possibility running beneath the surface of their daily interactions. The delicate balance they'd established was disrupted one Tuesday morning, when Hannah found Emma pale and listless at the breakfast table, pushing her oatmeal around without eating. "I don't feel good," the girl admitted when Hannah placed a concerned hand on her forehead. "You're burning up," Hannah said, alarmed at the heat radiating from Emma's skin. "Let's get you back to bed." After high, settling Emma with a thermometer and cool compress, Hannah called James, who was already at the office for an early meeting. 123, she reported when he answered. "She's complaining of a sore throat and headache." "I'll be home in 30 minutes, James replied without hesitation. "Should I call Dr. Winters?" "Let's see if we can bring the fever down first," Hannah suggested. "It might just be a seasonal bug. I'll make her some tea with honey." By the time James arrived home, Hannah had tucked Emma into bed with herbal tea and was reading to her from a favorite book. Olivia, reluctant to leave her twin, had to be coaxed to get ready for school. "Dad will take you," Hannah assured her. "I'll stay with Emma, and you can call at lunchtime to check on her." When James appeared in the doorway, relief washed over Emma's flushed face. "Daddy," she murmured, reaching for him. Hannah stood to give him space, touched by the tenderness with which this powerful businessman gathered his daughter into his arms, stroking her hair and murmuring reassurances. "It's probably just a virus," Hannah told him quietly, "but she should rest today." James nodded, pressing a kiss to Emma's forehead to gauge her temperature himself. "I'll take Olivia to school and clear my schedule for the day." "You don't have to do that," Hannah protested. "I can take care of her." "I know you can," James replied, meeting her eyes, "but I want to be here." After James and Olivia left, Hannah brought Emma some toast and more tea. The girl managed a few bites before sinking back against her pillows. "Tell me about when Mom was sick," Emma said suddenly. "Did she hurt like this?" Hannah froze, unprepared for the question. In all their conversations about Elizabeth, the specifics of her illness had rarely been mentioned. Hannah knew from James that she had succumbed to an aggressive cancer, diagnosed too late for effective treatment, but the twins had never asked for details. "I didn't know your mum, sweetie," Hannah reminded her gently. "But being sick is different for everyone." "Dad never wants to talk about it," Emma persisted, her fever perhaps loosening her usual restraint. "But I remember how thin she got, like me and Olivia got after she was gone." Hannah sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "Your mum's illness was very different from what you and Olivia went through," she said carefully. "You chose not to eat because you were sad and didn't know how to handle those feelings. Your mum's body couldn't use the food she ate because of her illness." Emma considered this. "But she still left us," she said finally, tears welling in her eyes. "She still went away." Hannah's heart broke for this child who was still trying to make sense of an incomprehensible loss. "Yes, she did," she acknowledged, and that's not fair, and it's okay to be angry about it. I am angry, Emma admitted in a small voice. Sometimes I'm so angry I want to scream, but then I feel bad because it's not Mom's fault she got sick. Being angry doesn't mean you don't love her, Hannah assured her. It's a normal part of missing someone. Emma was quiet for a moment. Hannah? Yes, sweetie. Are you going to leave us too? The question caught Hannah off guard. What makes... You asked that? Emma shrugged, picking at her blanket. People leave, Mom left, our other nannies left. Hannah chose her words carefully. I don't have any plans to leave. I care about you and Olivia and your dad very much. But you're not our mom, Emma said, watching Hannah's face closely. No, Hannah agreed. I'm not trying to be your mom. No one could replace her. Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. Good, because I don't want another mom, but I like having you here. I like being here, Hannah said simply. Emma drifted off to sleep soon after, the fever medication finally taking effect. Hannah sat watching her for a while, troubled by the conversation. She had been careful not to overstep her role as nanny, but clearly the twins had formed an attachment to her that went beyond employee-child, and if she was honest with herself, she had formed an attachment to them that went beyond professional duty. And then there was James. Her feelings for him had grown from respect to friendship to something she wasn't quite ready to name. The complexity of their situation, her as his employee, him as a recent widower, the vulnerable children in the middle, had kept her from exploring those feelings fully. But they were there, undeniable and growing stronger each day. James returned from taking Olivia to school, carrying a paper bag that emitted delicious aromas. Soup from that deli Emma likes, he explained, setting it on the bedside table. And I picked up some children's fever medication from the pharmacy, just in case we need it later. She's sleeping now, Hannah reported. The fever seems to be coming down a bit. James nodded, looking relieved. Thank you for taking such good care of her. It's my job, Hannah replied automatically. Something flickered in James's expression. Right, your job. He glanced at his sleeping daughter. I should check in with the office. Would you mind staying with her while I make some calls? Of course not, Hannah said, confused by the sudden coolness in his manner. When James returned an hour later, he seemed preoccupied, checking his phone frequently and responding to emails even as he sat beside Emma's bed. Is everything okay? At work? Hannah asked. Just a situation with our European branch, James replied without elaboration. I should be able to handle it remotely. The day progressed with Emma drifting in and out of sleep. Hannah prepared simple foods, toast, broth, more tea with honey, which the girl ate in small amounts. James remained in the room, alternating between focused attention on his daughter and distracted multitasking on his phone. By evening, Emma's fever had risen again despite the medication. She became restless, her face flushed and her breathing rapid. I think we should call Dr. Winters, Hannah suggested, concerned by the spike in temperature. James immediately put down his phone and felt Emma's forehead. You're right, this isn't normal. Dr. Winters, the family's pediatrician, advised them to bring Emma to the emergency room if her temperature exceeded 103.5 or if she developed other concerning symptoms. Otherwise, they should continue with fever reducers, fluids, and rest. As night fell, Olivia hovered anxiously near her sister's bed, reluctant to sleep in their room alone. Hannah made a pallet on the floor for her, promising to wake her if anything changed with Emma's condition. Around midnight, Emma woke disoriented and feverish, her temperature climbing despite the medication. James and Hannah exchanged worried glances. I'll take her to the emergency room, James decided, already gathering his keys and wallet. I'll come too, Hannah said, reaching for her sweater. No, James replied firmly. You should stay with Olivia. She shouldn't wake up to an empty house. Hannah knew he was right, but she felt torn. Call me as soon as you know anything. James nodded, gathering his feverish daughter in his arms with practiced gentleness. Of course. After they left, Hannah sat in the quiet living room, unable to relax. She checked on the sleeping Olivia periodically, straightened the already tidy kitchen, and paced the length of the apartment, waiting for news. When her phone finally rang at 3 a.m., she answered before the first ring completed. "James, how is she?" "It's strep throat complicated by dehydration," James reported, sounding exhausted. "They've given her IV antibiotics and fluids. They want to keep her overnight for observation." "Thank goodness," Hannah breathed, relief washing over her. "Do you need me to bring anything? Clothes, toiletries?" "No, we're fine," James replied. "How's Olivia?" "Still sleeping. Should I tell her in the morning, or will you be home?" "I'll stay here with Emma," James decided. "Can you handle Olivia's school drop-off? Tell her Emma is okay, but needs to stay at the hospital for medicine." "Of course," Hannah assured him. "Don't worry about anything here, just focus on Emma." "Hannah," James hesitated, "thank you for everything." The following morning was challenging. Olivia was upset about her sister's hospitalization and wanted to skip school to visit her, a request Hannah gently denied. "Your dad says Emma needs rest and you need to be in school," she explained as she prepared Olivia's lunch. "You can see her this afternoon when she comes home." "But what if she's not okay?" Olivia pressed, her face tight with worry. "What if she's really sick like Mum was?" Hannah knelt to look Olivia in the eye. "Your sister has strep throat. It's an infection that makes your throat hurt and gives you a fever, but the medicine they're giving her will make it go away. It's nothing like what happened with your mum." Olivia seemed only partially reassured. "Promise?" "I promise," Hannah said firmly. "Your dad would have told us if there was anything more serious going on." After dropping Olivia at school, Hannah returned to the empty apartment and began a thorough cleaning. She changed the sheets on Emma's bed, aired out the room and prepared chicken soup from scratch, knowing the sick girl would need gentle foods when she returned. She was chopping vegetables when her phone rang again. It was James. "They're releasing Emma soon," he reported. "Her fever's down and the antibiotics are working. We should be home in a couple of hours." "That's wonderful news," Hannah replied. "I'm making soup and her room is all ready." "Hannah." James sounded hesitant. "There's something else. While we were waiting for the doctor last night, Emma said something that concerned me." Hannah tensed. "What did she say?" "She asked if you were going to be her new mother." The words hung in the air between them. Hannah's knife stilled over the cutting board. "I see," she said carefully. "What did you tell her?" "I told her no, of course," James replied, his tone suddenly crisp and professional. "I explained that you work for us, that you're not family." The words stung more than Hannah expected. "Of course," she echoed. "That's the right thing to tell her." "Is it?" James asked, an edge entering his voice. "Because it seems like boundaries have become rather blurred lately. The girls are clearly developing an attachment to you that goes beyond your role as their nanny." "Children form attachments to caregivers," Hannah replied, trying to keep her voice neutral despite the hurt blooming in her chest. "It's natural, especially given what they've been through." "Yes, but in this case, it's creating confusion," James continued. "Emma seems to think you're becoming a permanent fixture in our lives in a role that—" He paused. "In a role that isn't appropriate." Hannah gripped the edge of the counter. "I've never encouraged the girls to see me as a replacement for their mother. I've always spoken respectfully about Elizabeth and supported their memories of her." "I know that," James acknowledged, his tone softening slightly. "This isn't an accusation, Hannah. It's just a concern. The girls are in a vulnerable place and so am I, if I'm being honest. We need to be careful about creating expectations that can't be fulfilled." "What exactly are you saying, James?" Hannah asked directly. She heard him sigh heavily on the other end of the line. "I'm saying that I think we need to reconsider some aspects of our arrangement, for the girls' sake." "Our arrangement," Hannah repeated flatly. "You mean my employment?" "No, not that," James clarified quickly. "The girls need you, I need you. But perhaps we should be more mindful of boundaries, more professional." The unspoken meaning was clear. Whatever had been developing between them personally needed to stop. The almost moments, the lingering glances, the late-night conversations that had nothing to do with childcare, all of it needed to end. "I understand," Hannah said, her voice carefully controlled. "You're right. Professional boundaries are important. Hannah—" "I'll see you when you get home with Emma," she interrupted, unable to bear his explanation, or worse, his apology. "The soup should be ready by then." She ended the call before he could respond, setting her phone down with deliberate care despite the urge to throw it across the room. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. What had she expected? That James Reed, wealthy CEO and recent widower, would want a serious relationship with his children's nanny? That she could step into the life his wife had left behind? She'd allowed herself to forget the reality of their situation, to imagine possibilities that existed only in her mind. By the time James arrived home with a pale but improved Emma, Hannah had composed herself. She greeted them with professional warmth, helping Emma settle into bed and bringing her a small bowl of the homemade soup. She provided James with instructions for Emma's medication schedule, her manner efficient and detached. If James noticed the change in her demeanor, he didn't comment on it. He seemed equally determined to maintain a polite distance, thanking her formally for her help and focusing his attention entirely on his daughter. That evening, after both girls were asleep, Hannah avoided the kitchen where she and James had spent so many evenings talking. Instead, she retreated to her room, pulling out her laptop to search for apartment listings in the city. The conversation with James had made one thing clear: her position in this household was temporary, regardless of what her heart might wish. It was time to start planning for what came next. The weeks following Emma's illness were marked by a careful politeness that permeated the Reed household. Hannah maintained a warm but professional demeanor with the girls, continuing their cooking projects and routine care, while subtly stepping back from the deeper emotional connection they'd formed. James threw himself into work, returning to his late hours at the office and brief appearances at family meals. The twins noticed the change, exchanging worried glances when Hannah declined to join them for movie nights or when their father made yet another excuse to retreat to his home office. The easy camaraderie that had developed over shared meals and kitchen adventures gave way to a strained civility that neither adult seemed willing to address. December arrived, bringing with it the first snowfall and the unavoidable approach of Christmas, the first the Reed family would face without Elizabeth. Hannah found the twins one afternoon sitting quietly in their room, looking through a photo album filled with images of holiday celebrations from previous years. "Mum always made gingerbread houses with us," Olivia said, not looking up as Hannah entered with freshly folded laundry, "and we'd decorate the tree while Dad played Christmas music." Hannah set the clothes on the dresser, uncertain how to respond. In their new, more carefully delineated relationship, was this a moment to engage or to respectfully withdraw? "Would you like to make gingerbread houses this year?" she finally asked, opting for middle ground. "We could add the recipe to your book." The twins exchanged one of their silent, communicative glances. "It wouldn't be the same," Emma said, after a moment. "Without Mom?" "No," Hannah agreed gently. "It wouldn't be the same. It would be different, but different doesn't always mean worse." "Dad probably won't even be home," Olivia said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "He's always working now." Hannah sighed internally. The girls had noticed their father's withdrawal, of course. They missed the man who had been relearning how to be present with them, who had made disastrous attempts at cooking, just to see them smile. "Your dad has a lot of responsibilities," she said carefully, "but I know he loves you both very much." "He's sad again," Emma observed. "Like before you came, did something happen?" The directness of the question caught Hannah off guard. "What makes you think something happened?" "You don't talk to each other anymore," Olivia said. "Not like before. And you don't laugh together in the kitchen at night after we go to bed." Hannah felt her cheeks warm, surprised that the girls had been aware of those late-night conversations. "Sometimes adults just get busy," she deflected. "It doesn't mean anything's wrong." Neither girl looked convinced, but they didn't press the issue. Instead, Emma closed the photo album with a decisive snap. "We want to make gingerbread houses," she declared, "and we want Dad to help. Can you ask him? He listens to you." "I'm not sure that's true anymore," Hannah thought, but she nodded. Talk to him. No promises, though. That evening, she waited until after the twins were in bed before approaching James's office. The door was closed, as it had been most evenings lately, but a strip of light showed beneath it. She knocked softly. "Come in," James called, his voice distracted. Hannah opened the door to find him surrounded by papers and open laptop screens, his tie loosened and hair disheveled from running his hands through it, a habit she'd noticed, emerged when he was stressed. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she began formally. "I wanted to discuss the girls' Christmas plans with you." James looked up, seeming to really see her for the first time in weeks. "Christmas," he repeated, as if the holiday had slipped his mind entirely. "Right. What about it?" The twins were looking at old photos today. They mentioned traditions they used to share with Elizabeth, gingerbread houses, tree decorating. They'd like to continue some of those traditions this year. James set down his pen, rubbing his face tiredly. "I haven't given much thought to Christmas, to be honest. It feels difficult." "I know," Hannah said gently. "The first holiday after loss always is. But I think it's important for the girls to find ways to honor their mother's memory while creating new memories they can hold on to. And they want me involved," James guessed, a hint of his old perceptiveness returning. "Yes, they specifically asked if you would help with the gingerbread houses." James was quiet for a long moment. "I've been distant lately," he finally acknowledged. "With them, with you." Hannah maintained her professional tone. "Your daughters have noticed, yes." "And you?" he asked, looking directly at her. "Have you noticed?" The question crossed the careful boundary they'd established, venturing into personal territory Hannah had been avoiding. "Mr. Reed." "James," he corrected softly. "Please." "James," she amended. "My concern is for the girls. They've made remarkable progress these past months, but the holidays will be challenging for them. They need stability and support right now." "You're right, of course," he said, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I'll clear my schedule this weekend for the gingerbread project." "Thank you," Hannah said, turning to leave. "Hannah," James called after her. "I owe you an apology." She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "That's not necessary." "It is," he insisted. "After Emma was sick, I panicked. I heard her question about you becoming her mother, and I overreacted. I created this distance between us that's affecting the whole household." Hannah turned to face him. "You were right to be concerned about boundaries. The girls are vulnerable, and confusion about my role in their lives could be harmful." "But that's just it," James said, standing up and moving around his desk. "I wasn't really worried about the girls. I was worried about myself." Hannah waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I was starting to depend on you," James admitted. "Not just for taking care of the girls, but for everything. Our conversations, your perspective, the way you made this place feel like a home again. It scared me." "Why?" Hannah asked simply. "Because I wasn't supposed to feel that way again," James said, his voice dropping. "After Elizabeth, I thought that part of my life was over. And then you came along with your southern cooking and your wisdom and your kindness. And suddenly I found myself looking forward to coming home at night, wanting to be better, to try harder. And it felt like a betrayal." "Of Elizabeth," Hannah supplied. "Yes," James admitted. "And of the girls. As if by allowing myself to care for you, I was somehow diminishing what we lost." Hannah felt her carefully constructed professional facade beginning to crack. "James, I never intended—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "You never pushed or expected anything. You were just you. And that was enough to make me start feeling again, start hoping again." He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "So after Emma got sick, I pulled away. Buried myself in work like I did after Elizabeth died. It was easier than facing these feelings." Hannah took a deep breath, trying to process his words. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying I made a mistake," James replied, taking a step toward her. "Pushing you away hasn't made these feelings disappear. It's just made everyone in this house miserable, including me." A mix of hope and caution warred within Hannah. "The complications I mentioned before still exist, James. I'm still your employee. The girls are still healing. You're still grieving. All true, he acknowledged. But maybe those aren't reasons to avoid what's happening between us. Maybe they're just realities we need to navigate carefully. He took another step closer. Unless I've completely misread the situation, and you don't feel anything beyond professional obligation toward this family. Hannah closed her eyes briefly, gathering her courage. You know that's not true. Then tell me, James urged softly. Tell me what you feel. I care about the girls, Hannah began carefully. More than I should, professionally speaking. I think about their futures, worry about their happiness, take pride in their accomplishments. They've become... She hesitated, then finished honestly. They've become precious to me. And me? James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you feel for me? Hannah met his gaze directly. Feelings that definitely breach proper employer-employee boundaries, she admitted. Feelings that scare me because they're complicated and potentially painful for everyone involved. A smile touched James's lips, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks. Complicated, he repeated. Yes, that's one word for it. James, Hannah said seriously, I can't be a replacement for what you've lost. I won't be. I would never ask you to be, he replied with equal seriousness. Elizabeth was unique, irreplaceable. What I feel for you isn't about replacing her or filling a vacancy. It's something new, something different. And the girls, Hannah pressed. What happens if whatever this is doesn't work out? I'm their caretaker. They trust me. They've already lost so much. I don't have all the answers, James admitted. But I know that pretending there's nothing between us isn't working. The girls sense the tension, the distance. They're confused and worried. He reached for her hand, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. I'm not suggesting we jump into anything, just that we stop pretending these feelings don't exist. Hannah allowed her fingers to intertwine with his, the simple contact sending warmth through her that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. So what do we do? We take it slow, James suggested. We're honest with each other. We prioritize the girl's well-being above everything else, and we see where it leads without expectations or pressure. It wasn't a perfect solution. The complexity of their situation remained. The power imbalance of their employment relationship, the twins' emotional vulnerability, the shadow of Elizabeth's memory. But the alternative, continuing this strained, artificial distance, was making everyone unhappy. Okay, Hannah agreed softly, slow and honest. James's smile widened, relief evident in his features. Starting with gingerbread houses this weekend? That seems like a good first step, Hannah replied, returning his smile. The weekend brought the promised gingerbread adventure. James cleared his entire Saturday, silencing his phone and leaving his laptop closed. The kitchen transformation began early, with Hannah supervising as the twins mixed and rolled dough, while James was assigned to cutting out the house pieces using templates they'd created together. Dad, you're making them too thick, Olivia critiqued, watching him struggle with the dough. They need to be sturdy, James defended himself. Engineering principles apply to gingerbread, you know. But they won't bake evenly if they're that thick, Emma countered. Hannah, tell him. Hannah laughed, the sound coming easily for the first time in weeks. Your father might have a point about structural integrity, but Emma's right about even baking. James raised his hands in surrender. The experts have spoken. Thinner it is. As the morning progressed, the initial awkwardness between James and Hannah dissolved into their old, comfortable rhythm. They moved around each other in the kitchen with unconscious coordination, anticipating needs, sharing small smiles, occasionally brushing hands when reaching for the same utensil. The twins noticed the change, their mood brightening in response to the adults' renewed warmth. By the time the gingerbread pieces were cooling and they were mixing various colors of royal icing, the kitchen was filled with laughter and teasing banter. Remember when Mom let us use too much food coloring and our tongues were blue for days? Olivia reminisced, the memory bringing a smile rather than tears. And Dad ate that candy cane roof piece and claimed Santa's elves took it, Emma added, giggling. I still maintain my innocence on that count, James insisted. though his twinkling eyes betrayed him. Hannah watched the family recall these moments, no longer feeling like an intruder on their private grief, but rather a respectful witness to their healing. Elizabeth's presence was acknowledged, honored, and woven into the new memory they were creating together. As they assembled and decorated the houses, more stories emerged, of holidays past, of Elizabeth's creative touches, of family traditions both common and unique. Hannah contributed tales of her grandmother's southern Christmas rituals, explaining how they'd mix pecan pralines and wrap them as gifts for neighbors. "Could we make pralines?" Olivia asked excitedly. "For our recipe book?" "Of course, Hannah." Her agreed. "They're actually not difficult, though the timing is crucial." "Another weekend project," James suggested, catching Hannah's eye with a warmth that made her pulse quicken. By evening, 4 gingerbread houses stood on the dining room table, each reflecting its creator's personality. James's was architecturally sound, if aesthetically questionable, with precisely aligned candy, but clashing colors. The twins had created whimsical cottages with snowdrifts of icing and carefully placed candies. Hannah's was a traditional design, with delicate piped details that spoke to years of practice. "They're perfect," Emma declared, surveying their work with satisfaction. "Not quite," James said, disappearing briefly before returning with his phone. "We need to document this for the recipe book." He set the timer and hurried to join them, positioning himself beside Hannah with the twins in front. His arm slipped naturally around Hannah's waist as they posed, the contact sending a pleasant shiver through her. The camera flashed, capturing the 4 of them surrounded by their creations, smiling genuinely. Later, after the twins had gone to bed, Hannah and James found themselves alone in the kitchen, cleaning up the considerable mess their day had generated. "Thank you for today," James said, passing her a freshly washed mixing bowl to dry. "It was good for the girls, good for all of us." "It was fun," Hannah agreed. "I haven't made gingerbread houses since I was their age." "You're very good at it," James observed, "like you are with most things." Hannah felt herself blush at the compliment. "Not everything. I'm a terrible singer, for one, and I can't parallel park to save my life." James laughed. "Now these are important revelations. I'll be sure never to ask you to park the car or join a caroling group." They continued cleaning in comfortable silence for a while, the domesticity of the task highlighting how natural it felt to be doing this together. "Hannah," James said finally, his tone growing serious, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." She set down her dish towel, giving him her full attention. "What is it?" "The holidays are approaching, and I was wondering—" He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "Would you consider joining us, not as the twins' nanny, but as our guest, for Christmas?" The invitation hung between them, its significance clear to both. This wasn't about employment or obligation. It was James, asking her to be part of their family celebration, to cross the line from employee to something more. What would that mean exactly? Hannah asked carefully. "It would mean taking Christmas Eve and day off," James explained. "Letting me cook for you for a change, joining us for our traditions, being present not because you're paid to be, but because you want to be." Hannah considered the invitation, its implications, its potential for joy and complication alike. And the girls? What would they think of this change in arrangement? "I think they'd be thrilled," James said honestly. "They miss the Hannah who was part of our family, not just taking care of it." The word family caught her attention, warming something deep inside her that had been cold for too long. "I'd like that," she said finally, "to join you for Christmas as your guest." James's smile was worth any risk the arrangement might bring. "Good," he said simply, reaching for her hand across the clean counter. "That's very good." As their fingers intertwined, Hannah felt the last of the artificial distance between them dissolve. Whatever came next would be complicated, certainly, but it would also be real as the growing feelings she could no longer deny or disguise behind professional detachment. They still had much to navigate. The twins' continued healing, the shadow of Elizabeth's memory, the practical considerations of their employment relationship. But for now, in the quiet kitchen with the scent of gingerbread still lingering in the air, Hannah allowed herself to hope that the family recipe they were creating together might turn out to be exactly what all of them needed. Christmas morning dawned with a gentle snowfall that blanketed Manhattan in pristine white. Hannah woke early, a habit from childhood that not even adulthood had broken. For a moment she lay still in the guest bedroom where she'd spent the night, not her usual nanny quarters, but the more luxurious room reserved for visiting family and friends. The change in accommodations was symbolic of her shifting role in the Reed household, a transition that had accelerated over the past week. After agreeing to join the family for Christmas as their guest rather than their employee, Hannah had watched with amazement as James threw himself into preparations with an enthusiasm she'd never seen from him. He'd insisted on handling everything himself, from selecting and decorating a magnificent Douglas fir that now dominated the living room to planning an elaborate Christmas dinner. "I want you to actually have a holiday," he'd explained, when she'd offered to help. Not just work through it like always. The twins had embraced the change with equal excitement, delighting in the secret of what they referred to as Hannah's Christmas surprise, a gift they'd apparently spent hours selecting with their father. Their whispered conversations and conspiratorial giggles whenever she entered a room had brought a warmth to Hannah's heart that had nothing to do with the season. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Hannah, are you awake?" Emma's voice called softly. "Come in," Hannah replied, sitting up against the pillows. The door cracked open and both twins slipped in, still in their matching Christmas pajamas, their auburn hair tousled from sleep. "Merry Christmas," they chorused, bouncing onto her bed with an energy that belied the early hour. "Merry Christmas," Hannah laughed, opening her arms to receive their enthusiastic hugs. "What time is it?" "Almost 7, Olivia reported. "Dad said we couldn't wake you before 6:30, and we waited as long as we could." "Very restrained of you," Hannah teased, touched by James's consideration for her sleep. "Is your father up too?" "He's making coffee," Emma informed her, "and he told us to tell you not to help with anything. You're officially off duty." "Those were his exact words," Olivia confirmed. "He said you're our guest, not our nanny, until after New Year's." Hannah felt a flutter in her stomach at the reminder of this temporary redefinition of her role. For the next week, she wasn't an employee of the Reed family. She was... what exactly? A friend. Something more. The uncertainty was both thrilling and terrifying. "Well then," she said, pushing these thoughts aside, "I suppose I should get dressed for Christmas morning." "Wear something cozy," Emma advised seriously. "Dad said we're staying in pajamas until noon." After the twins scampered off to wake their father, who Hannah suspected was already very much awake, she dressed in the soft cashmere sweater and leggings she'd brought for the occasion. When she emerged from the guest room, the scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls guided her to the kitchen. James stood at the counter, setting freshly baked rolls on a cooling rack. Like his daughters, he was still in pajamas, plaid flannel, pants and a faded Harvard t-shirt that revealed arms more muscular than his usual business suit suggested. His hair was charmingly rumpled, his expression relaxed in a way Hannah rarely saw. "Merry Christmas," he greeted her with a warm smile. "Sleep well?" "Very," Hannah replied, accepting the mug of coffee he offered. "Those cinnamon rolls smell amazing." "Family recipe," James explained. "One of the few things I can make without disaster. Elizabeth's mother taught me when we were first married." Hannah noted how easily he mentioned his late wife now, without the shadow of pain that had once accompanied her name. Not forgotten, never that, but remembered with love rather than fresh grief. "The perfect Christmas breakfast," Hannah said, taking an appreciative sip of her perfectly prepared coffee. "Just the right amount of cream, no sugar, exactly how she liked it." The fact that James had noticed and remembered this small detail touched her deeply. "Presents first, then breakfast," Olivia declared, appearing in the doorway. "That's the rule." "Is it now?" James asked with mock seriousness. "I don't recall that rule." "Dad," Emma groaned, joining her sister. "It's always been the rule." "Well, if it's a rule," James conceded, winking at Hannah over the twins' heads. We certainly can't break Christmas rules. They gathered in the living room, where the tree glittered with lights and ornaments, many of which Hannah knew held special memories for the family. Beneath it sat a collection of beautifully wrapped packages, more than Hannah had expected. "You first," Emma insisted, selecting a package and placing it in Hannah's lap. "Me?" Hannah asked, surprised. "But I thought the kids always went first on Christmas." "Another rule change," James explained with a smile. "Just for this year." Hannah carefully unwrapped the gift to find a leather-bound cookbook with her name embossed on the cover in elegant gold script. Opening it, she discovered it was filled with the recipes they'd created together over the past months, complete with the twins' descriptions and the family photos they'd taken. The final pages were blank, waiting for future creations. "We made it ourselves," Olivia said proudly. "Dad helped with the printing and binding, but we wrote everything and picked the pictures." "We left lots of empty pages," Emma added, "because we're going to keep cooking together for a long time." Hannah ran her fingers over the pages, emotion tightening her throat. This wasn't just a collection of recipes. It was a chronicle of healing, of connection, of the journey they'd taken together from grief to something approaching joy. "It's perfect," she managed, looking up at their expectant faces. "The most thoughtful gift I've ever received." The gift exchange continued, with Hannah presenting the twins with cooking equipment, sized for their small hands, and monogrammed aprons that made them squeal with delight. For James, she'd selected a rare first edition of his favorite novel that had required weeks of searching to find. "How did you know?" he asked in wonder, carefully turning the pages. "You mentioned once that you read it every year on your birthday," Hannah replied. "I thought you might like a special copy for the tradition." The look he gave her over the book's leather cover held more than gratitude, and Hannah felt heat rise to her cheeks. After breakfast, the day unfolded in a relaxed rhythm unlike any Christmas Hannah had experienced. There were no formal obligations, no rigid schedule, just the four of them enjoying each other's company. They played board games, watched classic holiday movies, and eventually changed out of pajamas only to bundle up for a walk through the snow-covered streets of their neighborhood. As dusk fell, they returned home rosy-cheeked and laughing to prepare the Christmas dinner that James had insisted on cooking himself. Hannah offered to help, but he shooed her toward the living room with a glass of wine. "I've been practicing," he assured her, "and the twins are my sous chefs. We've got this under control." Surprisingly, they did. The dinner James served was not only edible but delicious. A perfectly roasted turkey, creamy mashed potatoes and all the traditional sides, prepared with obvious care and attention to detail. "When did you learn to cook like this?" Hannah asked, impressed. "I've been taking classes," James admitted, "twice a week for the past month while you thought I was working late." "That's why he smelled like onions that time when he said he was at the office," Olivia giggled. "And why he had that burn on his hand that he said came from coffee," Emma added. James shrugged, looking pleased with himself. "I wanted to surprise you, all of you, to show that I've been paying attention to what matters." After dinner they gathered around the fireplace with mugs of hot chocolate. The twins, exhausted from the excitement of the day, leaned against Hannah on the sofa, while James sat nearby in an armchair, the firelight playing across his features. "Best Christmas ever," Emma murmured sleepily. "Even better than last year's?" Hannah asked gently, aware that last year Elizabeth had still been with them. Emma considered this thoughtfully. "Different," she finally said, "but still good. Mom would like that. We're happy." "She always said that was all she wanted for us," Olivia added, her voice thick with approaching sleep. "To be happy even when things are hard." James caught Hannah's eye over the girls' heads, his expression soft with both memory and present contentment. "She was right about that," he said, as she was about many things. When the twins finally succumbed to sleep, James carried them, one by one, to their bedroom, tucking them in with practiced tenderness. Hannah waited in the living room, watching the fire and reflecting on the day. How different it had been from the lonely Christmases she'd known since her grandmother's. Passing, how natural it had felt to be part of this family's celebration. James returned carrying a small wrapped package. "One more gift," he said, sitting beside her on the sofa. "I wanted to give you this without an audience." Hannah accepted the small box with curious fingers. Inside, she found a delicate silver key attached to a simple chain. "A key?" she questioned, lifting it from the box. "To the apartment," James explained, "and before you say anything, hear me out." Hannah waited, the key warm in her palm. "These past months have been transformative for all of us," James began. "You came into our lives when we were broken, barely functioning. The girls were starving themselves. I was drowning in work and grief, and this place was just a shell of a home." He reached for her free hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "You didn't just feed my daughters, Hannah. You nourished our souls. You showed us how to honor Elizabeth's memory while still moving forward. You taught us that healing doesn't mean forgetting." Hannah felt tears prick at her eyes but remained silent, sensing he had more to say. "I know our situation is complicated," James continued. "I'm your employer. The girls are still healing. I'm still figuring out who I am without Elizabeth. But I also know that when you're not here, this doesn't feel like home anymore, not to me and not to the girls." He gestured to the key in her hand. "This isn't a proposal or an ultimatum. It's an invitation to be part of our lives in whatever way feels right to you, to come and go freely, not as an employee, but as someone who belongs here." "James?" Hannah finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you," he replied simply, "gradually, unexpectedly, but completely. And while I don't know exactly what the future holds for us, I know I want you in it. Not as the twins, Nanny, but as my partner, if you'll have me." The declaration hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Hannah looked down at the key in her hand, the weight of it symbolic of the choice before her. She thought of the twins, of how they'd come to trust her, to depend on her, of James, who had opened himself to love again despite his loss, of herself, who had come to New York seeking a fresh start and found instead a family that needed her, as much as she needed them. "The girls," she began carefully. "How would they feel about this change?" "They adore you," James said simply. "Not as a replacement for their mother, no one could ever be that, but as someone who brings joy and stability to their lives, someone who sees them for who they are and loves them anyway." "And the practical considerations?" Hannah pressed. "I couldn't continue as their nanny if we were involved." "No," James agreed. "That arrangement would have to change. But there are options, if you're open to discussing them." Hannah took a deep breath, examining her own heart. She had come to love this family, the resilient twins with their secret language and fierce loyalty, and James with his quiet strength and gentle heart. What had begun as a job had become the center of her life in ways she had never anticipated. "I love you too," she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. "All of you, and I want to be part of your lives, not just as an employee." James's face transformed with joy, years seeming to fall away as he smiled. "So you'll accept the key?" "I'll accept what it represents," Hannah clarified. "A beginning, but we'll need to take this slowly for the girls' sake. They've been through so much change already." "Absolutely," James agreed. "We'll move at whatever pace feels right for everyone." He leaned forward, hesitating just briefly, before placing a gentle kiss on her lips, their first. It was soft, questioning, filled with promise rather than demand. When they parted, Hannah felt as though something had shifted into place. A piece of herself she hadn't known was missing suddenly found. "Merry Christmas." "Hannah," James whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "Merry Christmas, James," she replied, the silver key warm in her hand. 6 months later, Hannah stood in the kitchen of her newly opened restaurant, Southern Comfort, directing her small but efficient staff as they prepared for the evening service. The cozy Manhattan eatery had quickly gained a reputation for authentic Southern cuisine with modern twists, drawing favorable reviews from food critics and a loyal clientele. "Table 7 is asking for the chef," her hostess reported with a smile. "They want to compliment the shrimp and grits personally." Hannah wiped her hands on her apron, checking her appearance briefly in the reflection of a steel prep table. "I'll be right out." As she approached table 7, she broke into a smile at the sight of James and the twins, dressed for dinner and beaming at her with evident pride. "What a surprise," she teased, accepting James's kiss on the cheek and the twins' enthusiastic hugs. "I thought you were having dinner at home tonight." "We wanted to see you in action," Olivia explained, "and Dad said your shrimp and grits would be better than his, even though he practiced all week." "They absolutely are," James confirmed good-naturedly. "Though I maintain my biscuits are showing improvement." Hannah laughed, the sound easy and natural. High praise indeed. In the month since Christmas, their relationship had evolved carefully, with thoughtful consideration for the twins' feelings at every step. Hannah had resigned as their nanny, and James had hired a part-time housekeeper to help with domestic tasks. With James's encouragement and financial backing, Hannah had pursued her long-held dream of opening a restaurant featuring her grandmother's recipes. The twins had adjusted to the changes with remarkable resilience, perhaps because they saw how happy their father had become. They still cooked together as a family, adding new recipes to the book that now sat prominently in Hannah's restaurant office. They still spoke of Elizabeth with love and remembrance, keeping her memory alive while creating new traditions of their own. "Will you join us for dessert?" Emma asked hopefully. "Chef Miguel said he could handle the kitchen for 15 minutes. "For you?" "Absolutely," Hannah agreed, signaling to her assistant that she was taking a short break. As she settled into the 4th chair at the table, James reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over the engagement ring that now adorned her finger. A vintage sapphire rather than a diamond, selected with the twins' enthusiastic input just a month earlier. "How are the wedding plans coming?" Olivia asked, already anticipating her role as co-maid of honor alongside her sister. "Slowly but surely," Hannah replied, "though your father keeps suggesting we elope." "Only because you keep adding to the guest list," James defended himself, with a smile. "At this rate, we'll need to rent out Central Park." "It needs to be perfect," Emma insisted. "Hannah only gets married once." Hannah exchanged a warm glance with James, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this point. From a grief-stricken family unable to eat, to a joyful one planning a wedding celebration centered around food and togetherness. From a woman seeking a fresh start, to one who had found a home in unexpected places. "It already is perfect," she said softly, squeezing James's hand. "The most important ingredients are already here." Later that night, after service ended and the restaurant closed, Hannah returned to the apartment that had become their shared home. She found James in the kitchen, predictably practicing his technique for the southern biscuits he was determined to master before their honeymoon trip to Georgia. "You don't have to prove your culinary skills to my hometown," she teased, rapping, her arms around him from behind. "They'll love you regardless." "It's a matter of pride," James insisted, though he set down his pastry cutter to turn in her embrace. "The future husband of Southern Comfort's head chef can't serve subpar biscuits." Hannah laughed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Your biscuits are improving. And anyway, it's the intention that matters." "Speaking of intentions," James said, growing serious, "the girls and I were talking earlier about names." Hannah raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. "After the wedding," he explained, "they wanted to know if they would call you Mom." Hannah's heart stuttered. This was a topic they'd discussed before, always with the understanding that Elizabeth's place in the twins' lives was irreplaceable. "What did you tell them?" she asked carefully. "I told them it was something we'd all need to decide together," James replied, "that you would always love them, regardless of what they called you." Hannah nodded, relieved by his thoughtful response. "And what did they say?" James smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "They said they'd been thinking about it for a while, that they'd always have their first mom in their hearts, but that you were their mom now too, just differently." Tears pricked at Hannah's eyes. "I would never want to replace Elizabeth," she said softly. "I know," James assured her. "They know too. That's why they suggested something specific." He paused. "They want to call you Mama Hannah, to distinguish but also to acknowledge what you are to them." "Mama Hannah," she repeated, testing the sound of it. The title felt right somehow, honoring both her role in their lives and the mother who had come before her. "Only if you're comfortable with it," James added. "There's no pressure." Hannah thought of the journey they'd taken together, how she had entered this home as an employee and found a family, how healing had come through, nourishment, both literal and metaphorical, how love could grow in unexpected places, taking root in the very soil of grief and blossoming into something new and beautiful. "I would be honored," she said simply, her heart full. James pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We're lucky, you know, to have found you." "I'm the lucky one," Hannah countered, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I came to New York looking for a fresh start, and instead I found a family." In the quiet kitchen, with the scent of almost perfect biscuits filling the air, Hannah thought of the recipe book that had started it all, a project meant to help two grieving girls nourish their bodies, that had ended up nourishing all their souls. She thought of the empty pages still waiting to be filled with new recipes, new memories, new chapters in their shared story. Life, like the best recipes, didn't always follow a predictable path. Sometimes ingredients came together in unexpected ways, creating something far more delicious than originally planned. And sometimes the most nourishing meals were the ones that fed not just the body, but the heart and soul as well.